Today, South Korea responding fiercely to North Korea, firing warning shots and also sending out helicopters and jets after North Korea launched 5 drones into South Korea's airspace. According to the Korea Times, one of the 5 drones entered South Korea's capital city, Seoul, before returning back to North Korea. Now, the drone could not be shot down because it was over and near civilian areas. South Korean officials don't know what happened to the remaining 4 drones. It's also unclear whether the vehicles were armed. This is the first time in 5 years that North Korea has violated South Korea's airspace. It also comes 3 days after North Korea conducted yet another ballistic missile test toward its eastern waters. And the Chinese military staged one of its biggest exercises ever, sending 71 planes and 7 ships toward Taiwan in a 24-hour display of force. According to Taiwan's defense ministry, 47 of the PLA's aircrafts entered Taiwan's defense identification zone, 41 of which also flying across the Taiwan Strait median line. This is the unofficial boundary that was once claimed by both China and Taiwan. These exercises come in response to the U.S. passing its annual defense spending bill. It authorizes $10 billion in security assistance and fast-tracking arms sales to Taiwan over a 5-year period. Taiwan's defense ministry saying China's actions, quote, once again highlight its mentality of resolving differences by force and destroying regional peace and stability. Since the summer, Taiwan has been facing increasing pressure from China and fears of a potential Chinese invasion. Senior fellow and director of Chinese strategy at the Hudson Institute and author of the book, The 100-Year Marathon, Michael Pillsbury, joins me now. Thanks so much for coming on. I appreciate your time. So I was in Taiwan recently. I was in Taiwan last month, and I'm curious your perspective on this and opinion. The general consensus I got was that while China's military certainly dwarfs that of Taiwan's, a war with China would be a vicious ordeal, that Taiwan does have its porcupine strategy of defense. It has weaponry, its own produced weaponry, and that from the United States. And this is a war that China doesn't necessarily want and would ultimately really be bad for business for China. What do you think? Do you agree with that? Is this just another case of China flexing its muscles, or is there a threat of a Chinese invasion?
Well, I agree with your observations. I went to school in Taiwan to learn Mandarin, and then I've made about 50 visits to look into their defense requirements over the last several decades. But it's always been the problem of accidental war, not that either side would deliberately seek a conflict. In some sense, the level of risk, the level of danger is going up with these exercises. Because traditionally, if you want to do a sneak attack, a surprise attack on another country, you desensitize it over a period of even several years, so that Taiwan is getting used to the idea. A few months ago, it was 18 nuclear-capable bombers. Now it's this exercise that you talked about, as well as the Chinese aircraft carriers exercising off of Okinawa. So you desensitize your victim and then attack to your great advantage. Our problem, as you know very well from your visit, Taiwan's an island. So we can't do what we did in Ukraine of having weapons sort of shipped across the border. We would have to use American Air Force and Navy aircraft to supply Taiwan. Beijing would have to permit that, which I don't think they would do. If you go back to Eisenhower's memoirs in 1958, he faced this problem, where the Chinese ultimately did let American ships come in and reinforce Taiwan's possessions. But a repeat of 1958 is very dangerous, in part because Eisenhower had to send nuclear weapons to Taiwan. We kept nuclear weapons there from 58 until 1964, when Kissinger decided to take them out. So this is a dangerous situation that when you visit like you did, you can have a sense of calm and everything is okay. They have flights back and forth between Beijing and Taiwan every day. Taiwan has invested very heavily in chip-making factories and other factories in the mainland. So you have this sense of complacency, everything's okay. But an accidental war can break out quite quickly. That's what I'm worried about, John.
Yeah, and that's a great point. I interviewed during my time in Taiwan, which was, albeit pretty short. I wish it could have been longer, because it's an absolutely beautiful, fantastic country, as you well know, as you were just talking about. But I interviewed a retired lieutenant general who said if a war were to happen, basically China would just bombard Taiwan with missile and rocket strikes. And in his estimation, the Taiwanese military would be wiped out within just a couple days. I mean, is that a safe assumption?
It's a little bit pessimistic, but it's the general view of most people, including me, that the Taiwan military for decades now has planned only to hold out about 1 week or 2 weeks. They don't have the ammunition, they don't have the size of the forces. Their hope is we would come to their defense within about a week. We've encouraged them, obviously, to have more ammunition, to do training, but diplomacy got in the way. We don't recognize Taiwan as a country. So we can't do joint training, joint wartime practicing of plans. Taiwan, in many ways, is a sitting duck.
Yeah, it certainly is. Well, let's hope it doesn't get to that point and diplomacy wins out over any military intervention or attack. Michael Pillsbury, I appreciate you coming on, and a belated Merry Christmas to you, Happy Holidays, and Happy New Year as well to you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Well, the Taliban have dealt another blow